Good morning. Truly is a beautiful day out today. I don't know about your week, but my week has been very busy since about 2-3 weeks ago as we prepared for the semester to begin and just trying to catch up with all the things that happened last Sunday afternoon. It was just almost overwhelming at times as we introduced ourselves to 65,000 students that seemed to all come by the booth at the same time at once. And it was fantastic. It was wonderful, but preparing for that, leading up to it, and then just getting into the rhythm of the weeks, our Monday night devotionals with the college students, our Tuesday nights on campus, our Wednesday nights back here with our Bible classes, our Thursday night online classes. There's just a lot of wonderful things happening consistently. And so as I was preparing this week, I did one of those things that all good husbands do. I waited till the night before to tell my wife what I might need to wear the next day. Now, that's what all good husbands are supposed to do, right? Cause moments of spiritual growth and so forth with their spouses, specifically in patience. I think I stretch that sometimes, that I stretch her patience with me, but there's a reason for it. As I walked in today, there was a lot of you, and I mean a lot of you, who looked at me and went, what's going on? What's happening? And I specifically thought to myself, I think I've just totally set them up. And I didn't mean to, because to me, it's just one of those things that's a little bit different. I know that when I dress up, people go, what's happening here? This is not normal. But on the other hand, I know the well-intentions that you have. There's nothing nefarious, there's nothing, no weird high expectations, those things. I know your heart for that. And so I don't want you to think that I took it in a wrong way. I did it. In fact, I kind of chuckled to myself because I went, little do they know. Little do they know. You see, we're in Matthew 7 today, and I want you to turn there with me if you've got that, because we're going to look at something that is a fascinating aspect when it comes to Christianity and faith. Growing up in Italy, I had an opportunity with our gardener who was part of the Harding program. And the gardener, Antonio, was in his 80s. I've shared with you some of these stories before. He's a fantastic man. He was a child during World War II. I think he was 12 or 13 and hid out in the fields with his 12 brothers. And they worked against the Italian military and the Nazis at the time during that conflict. And he had so many stories. And he had a cane that he would walk around with all over the fields. And Harding owned about 40 acres of olive trees. And so we used to go around with these olive trees and have to take care of them. And as a child, he would teach me what it looked like and what it meant to prune the trees, to take care of the trees. And my favorite part of the year was the fall, because that's when we got to actually cultivate the olives, which means I got to climb old A-frame wooden ladders high up into these old olive trees, get up inside those trees, and we had these old rakes, and we would scrape the branches and they would drop below, but not just to the ground. Underneath, we had put old World War II U.S. military parachutes underneath the trees, wrapped around them. And they were made of this silk fabric. It's one of those things that I can still feel in my fingers. Because then we would gather them up and we would pull them all the way, and it was my job to pull them down the hill, laden with all of this fruit that had come from this. And then we would take that fruit, and I used to go to the old presses. Now, if you've seen them in movies, it's the old presses where you'd get on there with your feet. We weren't making wine, y'all. This is Harding. This did not happen at the time. We were making olive oil. And so we would take this and go down there, and you wouldn't press it, but there would be these mills that would be ground, and you could turn them, and would make this beautiful olive oil. And we had our own olive oil. We would make it, and we would use it for salads and for cooking and all sorts of different things. And the process of it, of taking care of these trees year in and year out, was something I look forward to. It's the days I would run up to Antonio, is it time? It's like, no, it's not time yet. Is it time? It's not time yet. And I would go out there, and he would always yell at me and get his cane. He'd swap my hand, and he would say, stop messing with the olives. And that was just kind of our pattern that we would go through the years. You see, I learned a lot about what it meant to take care of a tree. I also learned what happened when a tree dies. And I learned what happens when a tree is struggling, and so you have to prune it back unbelievably hard. He used to call it a hard prune, all the way back to where it did not even look like a tree very much anymore. But it needed to be pruned back for its own health. I learned what a diseased tree looked like, one that was decaying from the inside, and that its root system with that disease, if it wasn't eradicated, would lead to the disease of all the others. and that you needed to do something about those things. I also learned what a healthy tree looked like that never produced fruit. It was a facade. It was a fake tree. In fact, he used to say, this is no good than a pile of wood. It's all it's good for is kindling. That's all it's good for. He goes, it looks healthy, but it will produce no olives. There's nothing there for there to be taken. Now, I need to catch, and this is where I said I feel like I was being kind of maybe a little bit tricky with you this morning. You see, we in our culture have a standard and have had a standard since about the 1950s as to what Christians look like. Some of you just looked at me and I could tell it hit you right between the eyes. We have this perception of what Christianity should look like. Now, I want to separate this real quick from the premise of modesty in our modern culture. Do you hear that? Two separate conversations. What I'm talking about is the perception of this is what a Christian looks like. Most people, and can I be honest, most of us don't even know where that came from. Putting on your Sunday best. Anybody? Sunday best, you remember that terminology? You heard that as a child. In fact, I did too. Don't miss that. I did all the time. But it's been lost. It's been lost to cultural changes. You see, I remember my grandfather telling me the story because I asked him once, said, Grandpa, where did that come from? And he told me, he said, have you ever heard of the saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater? And I said, yeah, I've heard that saying. I don't know what it is. And he said, well, it used to be that people would work in the fields or in the plants all during the week, and they would take a bath one night a week. And it was usually Saturday night. The father would be first, then the mother, then the oldest child, and so forth, all the way down to the smallest child. The baby would be last. And by the time the baby got in the bathwater was what color? It was dark. In fact, that was the problem, is that you couldn't see the baby in the bathwater. It was so dirty. And so after a whole week of wearing your overalls or whatever it may have been in the fields, you would put on the one thing that you had that was clean, which became your Sunday best. Now, I want you to hear me. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a beautiful representation of a cultural time. And in fact, so many of you look wonderful today in what you're wearing. The problem arises when we associate spiritual health with what somebody looks like on the outside. Because that is not reality. Because you know how easy it is to put this on and to fake your way each and every Sunday, each and every Wednesday, each and every Bible class, and during your daily life. I'm okay because I look okay. Has that been your experience in real life? That you're okay because you look okay? In fact, what we're going to see here in Matthew 7 is we're going to back up a verse, by the way. You're going to see the context of what's being said here and what we must be aware of, what we must notice when it comes to this incredible passage. If you'll look with me in Matthew 7, starting in verse 15, it says this, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly on ravenous wolves. Now, notice that. That is something that looks like one thing, but is another. Now, can we all just kind of have a family moment here just real quick and notice? There are people who claim Christianity, who walk around taking the name of Christ, claiming the name of Christ, that you spend time with, that you look at their life and you go, that is not a Christian. That is not a believer. And I don't mean this in a judgmental way. I mean their life does not show any fruit in any way, shape, or form of Christ in their life. We see that. There are people who are pretending. In this case, there are actually people who claim Christianity and are going around teaching things that are actually false. Now, if I said that and just went denominationalism or whatever else like this, all of us would go, amen. But rarely do we stop and go, or is it me? Is it me in my life that is actually stopping for a second and living that which I say I am? Or am I just going through the motions and I look fine on the outside, but on the inside, I am not living as Christ would have me live? Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. There are people who claim Christ who are not Christians. Now, in our modern culture, I'm not supposed to say that. Like we're not supposed to say that. We're not supposed to say there are people who claim Christ who are not Christians. There are people all the time who come to me and talk about their church hurt. Anybody heard that terminology? Church hurt, church trauma, things like that they look back on. And most of the time, not only is it real, did things actually happen, but I can easily look at that and go, that's not Christ. That is not what Christians are supposed to do. That is not how Jesus treats you. So that's not Christianity. That's the failings and faults of those who are either doing their best and have failed or are simply ravenous wolves, dressed up, but not real in who they are. Look at the next verse. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? You can tell who people are by what they produce in their lives. Let me just be honest with you. I wear t-shirts and jeans almost every day, and there's a reason for that. College students will see right through you if you're faking your way. Anybody know that? Anybody know that this generation will see right through you if you're faking to be something that you are not? That's been my experience. In fact, one of the key things that millennials and then this Generation Z and Generation Y, I don't know what generation we're on now. Are we going backwards in the alphabet at this point? It feels like it. But I don't know where we are, but what I can tell you is authenticity is one of the key components that is screamed out consistently. Just be real. If I were to fake my way through something, they would see it. They would kind of feel it. And can we be honest? Most of us feel that and know that too. We're not surprised by that. You will recognize them by their fruits. So we need to ask the question, and we've been going through this whole series all through this year, through this last summer, in fact, where we've talked about the fruits of the Spirit. So what are the fruits supposed to be for a believer, for a Christian? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And when I say those things, did some of you hear the song start playing in your head? I did. I'm VBS, all those things came to mind. But what I want you to hear again is, those are the things that people are supposed to know about you as a believer. Those are the things people are supposed to associate to you as a person who claims Christ. Now, can I be honest with you? Anybody here failed this week? This morning? All of us? Let me just put it this way. I found a beautiful quote last night that kind of resonated with me. Sometimes, because this will feel like hypocrisy, right? When a Christian fails. Sometimes hypocrisy is just a Christian trying to do better the next day. That's what it will look like. But the reality is we're not perfect. We're made perfect by a loving God, but we're not perfect. And so it's a struggle at times. And so there will be moments where we will fail you, where I will fail you, where the elders will fail you, where you will fail us. That will happen. But if love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control are at the forefront of what we are seeking, then guess what? All of those things are covered in many, many ways. Because there's patience with others, and there's love when they fall, and there's self-control when you want to react, and there's gentleness when you want to say something, but instead you learn to control those things. So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree, notice this, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. Now here's what I need you to tell, because there are people who claim Christianity who live out lives that are not Christian. You need to learn to discern the difference between the two. People who claim Christ but are not, and people who claim Christ and are doing their everyday best to live out that representation on this world. But our world right now has lost the ability to discern between the two. So instead, they will clamor out against the church and against Christians and against Christianity, saying things like, well, look at all these hypocrites and look at all these people out there. And part of me wants to go, yes, we are. But we're here and we're trying, and yes, we're going to not get it all perfect all the time, and we are doing our best every day, but that's not Jesus. That's where we have fallen you. That's where we have messed up, but not him. He is perfect, and he will provide you rest and give you all that you need in this world. But we have to learn to discern between the two. And so let me just lay my cards on the table here with you this morning. There are some of you who have church hurt or have people in this room that you're still upset at. That's not Christ. That's not the church. You have to separate the two. If it's affecting your faith, you need to find reconciliation with those individuals. You need to practice the fruits because you will know them by their fruits. If all you know or you feel when you come to worship God, we call it go to church, right? I hope instead you are here to worship God, that when you are here to worship God, if you've come here today and there is bitterness, if there's resentment, if there's anger, those are not the fruits of the Spirit. That's the poison of this world. Those are the things that Satan uses to distract, to tear you down. And in fact, he wants you to attach it to the church and to Christ. He wants you to see that resentment and attach it to people of faith. It's how he destroys us from within. It is the rot that tears up at the roots of the church. We have to learn to let those things go. We have to learn to deal with those things, because otherwise they will cause complete division. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. This is definitely the part in our culture we don't like to talk about. What happens to the trees who do not produce good fruit? I just read it. They get thrown into the what? The fire. The process of finding a tree that is dead and cannot come back to life, will not come back to life, is devastating, especially after you've spent time pruning it and doing your best with it. But it will kill the other trees because it will sap away nutrients or things and problems along the ground and the root system and the rest if you do not take it out. We have to know how to discern between good fruits, bad fruits, and also when there is spiritual death. When there is so much loss that the fact is, I'm just going to put it this way, you still look like a tree, you look like a tree, you look like a Christian, but you're dead on the inside. And if I can be really honest, there are a lot of us, even today, who are alive on the outside, but spiritually dead. And I don't like saying that, but I cannot, in good conscience, walk away from what the scriptures say and say, you're fine, because you look like a tree. As long as you keep looking like a tree, it'll be fine. Because this last verse, when it says, thus you will recognize them by their fruits, speaks specifically to what the expectations are when it comes to what it is to be a tree, what it is to be a Christian. Now, this is where we often also get lost in this idea of works. Can we understand something? There is nothing you can do to earn your salvation. There's nothing. It is a free gift of God that he gives to us all. There is nothing you can do to earn your salvation. It is a free gift of God. But for us to sit back and accept this gift and then do nothing, that is mental assent without any physical change, without any heart change. It's saying, I'll take the gift, but I'm not doing anything for it. And now hear me, the gift is free. Now, I also want to tell you, it's free in the sense of God has freely given it, but it will cost you something. It will cost you your life. That has always been the standard by God. What will it cost you? Change. You have to bear fruit. It's not good enough to just be a tree. You have to bear good fruit. You can't bear bad fruit. You can't bear no fruit. You must bear good fruit. In the book of James, when we did a study a while back, one of my favorite lines that came out of this was this premise of that we do not work to be saved, we work because we are saved. That we go about our daily lives serving God to the best of our abilities because of the joy found in Christ. What does that joy look like? It looks like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the fruits that we are supposed to set forth. Those are the things that we are called into in this world. To be different. Now, can we be honest? There will be a time, and I believe it's sooner rather than later, we talked about this in class last week, where just being a Christian and having the joy of the Lord in your life will directly make you different than every person around you. Have you started seeing this or noticing this in some way? I'll just give you an example. When I travel through airports, anybody go through airports? When I go through airports, I can always tell the people who have done it before and those who have not. Have you picked those people out? Some of you, it's you, right? How many of you have got the little carry-on that you roll in and you're ready to go, you're in and out, you're good? 75 bags? There's a few of you that were like, and some of y'all's husbands were like looking over the shoulder. I can tell the difference between those individuals. I can also tell the people who are used to delays and things that are happening, like the businessmen. I can always tell those guys who have been there, done that quite a few times. I can also tell the first-time flyers. It's the whiteness of the face, complete sheer terror. I can tell the difference between those individuals. Christians, I believe we're going to come to a time, even in our culture, where we will be able to discern who people are by their very nature and character. The very nature and character. You know why? When something terrible happens, they go, man, that's terrible. I hate that. I'm sorry that your flight was delayed. Would you like to spend some time talking? We can go get some lunch. We've got 2 hours now. You want to go do something together? And try to make the best of a situation instead of making the worst of a situation, which seems to be our world's mantra. How can we make the worst of this? You see, because when you live in a culture that has decided that victimization is the high point of life, then to be truly a person who goes and says, man, I know life could get, I know this is terrible, it's worse than the rest, but no matter what happens to me, there's joy in the morning. There's peace in the morning. You know why? Because I've learned through time that patience is a beautiful thing, and love is a beautiful thing, and joy. Oh man, just to have joy. Just to be able to wake up and go, my job is terrible, but I have a job. And I have an opportunity to share Christ with people. And I have an opportunity to show love to people. And my family's taken care of. May God be glorified. You see, the fruits that we're supposed to set forth are not arbitrary. He's not asking you to produce something that is outside of the realm of what God did for you. He showed love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. He shows that every day, not just through his Son, but through the grace that he gives us all, through the mercy that he gives us all, through the love that he gives us all. And he says, if you're planted in the ground and you are getting the nutrients that you need, and you might ask, what are those nutrients? Well, you're here today. It's the encouragement, the uplift, the study of his word is what gives us life. To hear from God through his word is what gives us life. And when we know more and we're able to do more, we can grow in our faith, and that produces fruit. And the beautiful thing about it is this: the more you spend time in God's word, the more you understand that that's where life comes from, then the fruits come out almost naturally through you in spite of you, because of what God is doing through your life. In spite of us. There have been, because some of you may have had this moment, have anybody had the moment where something terrible happened and your reaction was complete calm? And you were like, wow, no, I can't believe that happened. I had this happen a few years ago. This is a random thing, but we were in Vietnam, and I remember just some terrible people were down the road at this little shop on the corner, happened to be there, and this is not a pretty shop, not a wonderful shop. And in fact, we figured out very quickly that this was a place of abuse and harm and sexual exploitation. It was a horrible place. And I remember walking by there just going, and my heart just broke almost instantly. And I do remember that they were shouting out the door at us, trying to get us to come in. No interest in going in whatsoever. Instead, my friend and I, we just kind of went, man, it's heartbreaking. So we went back to our hotel, which is about 2 blocks away, and I remember just kind of praying. God, I don't know what you would want in that situation, but I don't know what we're supposed to do in those moments, but if you would just do something. Later that night, I went out to grab some food from right around the corner, and I recognized two of the girls, and they came out, and they came and sat down, and they looked over at me, and one of them was talking to the other very quickly in Vietnamese, and I don't speak Vietnamese, but one of them turned and kind of in very broken English said, "You're a Christian, right?" And I went, "Yes." She said, "We could tell because we had a feeling you wouldn't abuse us." And I just remember going, "I'm sorry, what? Where did that come from? What?" And I was taken aback, and then it hit me. Because the spirit that we have when you are about doing good, it even emanates to others. We were there as missionaries. We were there to reach out to the people and the rest. And we, without saying a word, it became noticeable even by the way we looked at people. People who have known abuse and harm and decay and all sorts of terrible things could tell simply by our walking by and looking at them. Because I guarantee you, there's a difference between somebody who looks at you and wants to destroy you and somebody who looks at you and has empathy and wants what's best for you. The conversation that followed was one of despair, brokenness. And I remember sitting there and listening and saying, "I can pray for you. I can teach you however you want." We were there for a day. And for 4 or 5 hours, they poured out their souls to what had happened to them. Broken people. Now, that may seem like an extreme example, but what I'm telling you, the fruits, and even in that moment, just the look that we had given meant the world to them. And I'm telling you, there are people in your lives where if you live out the fruits of the Spirit on a consistent basis, they will notice these things because you're meant to be different in this world. You're not meant to look like every other person. You're not meant to be like every other person. So sometimes that means dressing up. And sometimes that means going and talking and listening to people that you wouldn't normally have a conversation with. And sometimes that means taking the suit and tie off and sitting down with somebody who would never sit with somebody in that situation. It means becoming all things to all men, that we might, through God's love and grace, just save a few. We're meant for more. You as a tree are meant for more. Because if you don't live this out, I don't want you to fool yourself into missing the verses that say, "A fruit that does not produce tree is no good for anything except for it will be torn down and burned up." You're not fooling truly anyone. The only person that is being fooled in that scenario is you. Don't let that be the case. Now, today, you may be a person here that has struggled with church hurt, and you've ascribed it to the church and not realized that that is the people who have failed you at times. But it's not Christ. He has never failed you. Jesus has never failed you. He has always offered his grace and his mercy. Or you may be someone who has not put on Christ through the waters of baptism and died to yourself, and you are tired in this world, and you want to live out your life and the beauty of what it means to be a Christian. Or maybe you just need to change today and realize that today is the day that I start allowing God to work through me to bear good fruit in this world, that I may be known for the good works, not that I do that, but that which my God does through me. Because otherwise, do you know how easy it is to be like a church of just some trees that show up every Sunday and Wednesday? We're in the field, we're here, but when the time comes for the harvest, there is nothing there for God to harvest. And when that time comes, as I learned from my friend Antonio, you cut the trees down and you burn them because they are not what they say they are. None of us is going to fool God. But on the other hand, all of us get to rest in the joy and knowledge of his peace and mercy when we live out our life every day looking for him to bear fruit through us each and every day. If you have a need today, this church is here for you. We want to be here for you. Don't just look at the idea of coming forward as just some type of random thing that some people do sometimes when something truly terrible is happening. In fact, my hope this morning is that some of you will simply acknowledge in your own lives the need to change, the need to bear fruit, not just to claim Christ, but to live Christ each and every day. And I'm just going to tell you right now, if you were to do that, that would be a beautiful thing because it would be noticeable within our church family. It will be seen. We will be known by our fruits. I don't know what your need may be today, but if you have one, will you come as together we stand and as we sing?